Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
How is everyone? Good evening, good evening, good evening. Welcome to the Multifaith EMI call. Happy New Year. Happy, like all of the things. We've not seen each other by Zoom at least since the end of November, 1st of December. And so the last time we were together by Zoom on this call, we were looking at a whole different world than we are in right at this moment. And so, I want to first reintroduce myself. I'm Deirdre Reed. I am one of the former board members for the Multifaith EMI, and I help to support this call and also our UnConference in 2024. So I wanted to, we're getting back together. This is the last of our series. We just for everyone to just be reminded, we came out of the UnConference in Dallas, really hyped up about the fact that we wanted to do, continue the work, but also wanted to do some consciousness raising and some collective learning together. And so we decided to look at 6 aspects of the carceral state and take a deep dive each month into one of those issues. And so tonight's issue is the death penalty. It is our final in this series, and we're so grateful for you all to be here as we go into this very uncertain time. I was hoping that we could get Dr. Warnock to join us for our first, meeting of the year. Unfortunately, you all know what's happening. He called us. He tells us that he is the pastor in the Senate, and so we were asking Pastor Warnock, could he come and bring us greetings as the founder of our organization? But the senator had to do his duty, and so we hope that you all would join us in prayer first for our country, also for our leaders as we go into this tumultuous time, and then also to strengthen us. I love the song. I know it's cutting in and out a little bit, but strengthening us as we, count the victories that we have, but hold the line as we try to push towards justice, and in particular as it relates to dismantling the carceral state. So I want to ask everyone to put your name in the chat. And one word that describes how you're feeling right now, you can do that. And I'm going to pass it over to our sister Sucheta, who's going to open us up in prayer.
Thank you so much, and welcome everyone. My name is Sucheta Kumath. I'm currently serving as the EMI board member, so honored to be invited to offer my prayers. So here, as a person of Hindu faith, please join me in making this offering to this great cause. Dear Lord, today, as we stand in awe of your goodness and omniscience, of your abundant compassion, I invite you all to presence his grace and innumerable blessings. May our eyes be widened by your magnificent glory, hearts overflow with thanksgiving, and our tongues chant your everlasting greatness. Here's a prayer offering so this good work be blessed by you. Om Bhur Bhuraswaha Tat Savitur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Na Prachodayat. May my intellect be steady without agitation. May it be clear without anger, and may it rest in equanimity. May the brilliant light of the sunbeam through my intellect pierce the very cause that I am trying to find solution for. May your kindness and your incredible blessings guide our way. And may we all have the success so that justice be served. This wonderful name, in the wonderful name of Lord Krishna, we pray. Jai Shri Krishna. I pass it on to Deirdre.
Thank you so much for that prayer. So we're going to jump right in. I want to I keep doing our little reminders because it's been a minute since we've been together. But these conversations are not supposed to be one-sided. We are not getting on this call to for you to sit and get. What we're trying to do is make sure that you get some information, you get an opportunity to hear from experts around the issues, and then for us to sit together and to think, to strategize, to strategize, and then to say what is our individual actions, what are our collective actions inside of our faith institutions, and then what can we do together. And so today I want to welcome our sisters Jayna and Joia, who are leading this work. Joia is leading the work nationally. Jayna is leading our work in Georgia, and is going to tell us a lot about how we can get immediately started on some things, even in the next 2 weeks. So I'm going to turn it over to you all, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Deirdre. So as you mentioned, I am doing this death penalty work here in Georgia. I'm the director of Restorative Justice Ministry for the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Atlanta, the chair of the Georgia Catholics Against the Death Penalty Committee, and I am also an MFI board member. So the work that we do is ranging from the direct service work in prisons and doing prison ministry, which includes Jackson, where death row in Georgia is, and as well as advocating for abolition, all told, but also for any reforms that we can achieve in the Georgia legislature. And you'll be hearing more about that very soon. We'll get into that. And I want to let Joia have a moment to introduce herself and tell us a little bit about what she does with FLOCC.
Thank you so much, Jayna and Deirdre and the rest of the team for having us here. For such a time as this, we need to be drowned in these types of spaces. So I am Joia, Erin Thornton. I am originally from Memphis, Tennessee. There's some connection between Memphis and Atlanta, and I really like that connection. But I am the founder and the national director of the Faith Leaders of Color Coalition, or FLOCC, as we are affectionately called, in our group. And the Faith Leaders of Color Coalition is a multi-faith national organization that is dedicated to interrogating the capital punishment system. So I was really glad when Deirdre talked about we're here to listen and learn, and that's exactly what we do within FLOCC. We interrogate this system, this state-sanctioned death system. So I'm really happy to lead this organization. We started in 2021 with just 21 people on a Zoom call, just like this one. And now we have grown to over 500 individuals, entities, conventions, and conferences that are engaged with FLOCC. So we'll learn a little bit more about that, Jayna. I'm ready to have our conversation. I can't get over the fact that we are the yin and the yang of each other. I don't know if anyone has noticed that, the dark hair, the red dress, the red hair, the dark dress. So I know that this is going to be a good conversation.
Yeah, we didn't plan that, by the way. We just noticed it when we got on. Great minds. So yeah, you mentioned that you're the founder and leader of FLOCC. And so I guess my first question is, what led you to create FLOCC? What did you see happening? What was happening in the spaces that you were in where you thought this is something that needs to be coming together in this space?
Sure. So I have always been involved in policy. When I first graduated with my MPA, I went to education policy, and I noticed that some of the same challenges that our families were going through with the carceral system, involved in the criminal legal system, those needed to be tackled first before we even began to talk about why their children were absent or why they couldn't be self-sufficient for their child. So for me, when I started in this work, I am also the daughter of a pastor, so I'm a PK. I knew I spoke the language of the church, but I knew through my academic studies, I also spoke the language of law and of policy. And what I found is that some of us in the policy professional world, we engage pastors after the fact, right? We need them to stand on the steps and look nice. You know, we need them to sign a letter, right? Because we're sending a letter out to folks, or we need them to support families that we are representing in the legal system, but we didn't invite them in on this participatory policy model that needed to happen. So there was a gap. There was a gap that existed between engaging faith leaders in the work of anti-death penalty work, with litigation, with our cases, with the legislation, with the bills that we were trying to pass, and also through learning, because we meet pastors at different points and times in their lives, right? So a lot of the pastors that I've talked to one-on-one, not all of them have been, on board with the death penalty. They've needed to blow off steam, and they've needed to unpack, and I've allowed them that space. But I also want to make it very clear, Jayna, that the Black church and Black faith leaders have always been strategists and champions and public figures for justice in human rights and social rights movements. So FLOCC is just an extension of the work that has already been done. We are just a brick added to the work of churches like Ebenezer and churches like Claiborne Temple in Memphis, Tennessee. So FLOCC is just an extension of that work within the death penalty system, because we have that special focus on engaging Black pastors in that work. So I do have a question for you, Jayna. Since we're talking about the death penalty, and I know that you lead this work just like I do, how has your thoughts evolved and changed about the death penalty? Because I know you probably didn't always start here.
Mm-hmm. Actually, you're right. And I was thinking about this, and every once in a while I think about this, because when you do this work, people tend to ask you that question. And for some people, they've always been on the, the right side of it, right? I wasn't. Probably through high school, college kind of thing is maybe when my thinking started to change. But I kind of had that understanding, right? We need justice,
right,
for people who have been harmed, and had that idea of what justice looked like, which has greatly evolved for me. But thinking that justice is something that you kind of mete out, right? That it is synonymous with punishment, and that's how you make things right. And so when you equate those two, that's kind of the logical solution, right? Is that this person has to be punished in an equal way to what they did. And I think over the course of studying, so I have master's degrees in history and theology. And over the course of studying all of those things that you study when you get really deep into studying more history than you would, right, in high school or just some random college classes, undergrad classes, and then getting into studying theology, makes you, I think, if you're really engaging the material, should make you question all
right,
of the assumptions that you have, in addition to just the facts of who the death penalty disproportionately affects, and knowing that it is not justly applied in the system. So even if you were in favor of the death penalty, simply knowing that people are disproportionately impacted by it just because they're in certain marginalized groups, and not for any, oh, this group of people commit more crimes, there's no reason for it other than, classism, racism, ableism, all of these other isms that go into the way that people are disproportionately impacted. As soon as you know those facts, it makes it very difficult to square the idea that this is a just outcome.
absolutely.
And so that's kind of what, in addition to just kind of developing my moral understanding of what an execution and what the death penalty means, the simple facts is that it doesn't behave in a just system, and it doesn't behave in a just way. So those two taken together kind of put me into what is very clearly an abolitionist path that I'm on right now.
Right.
And speaking of an abolitionist path, what are your hopes? So we're talking about the future, and we know that the next few years a lot's going to happen, right? We are bracing ourselves for some things, right? So what are your hopes for the future of the abolition movement over the next 5 years or so?
Oh, Jayna.
An easy question.
And I hope
Come
you
on.
guys you guys are enjoying this coffee chat that you're peeking in that Jayna and I are having. If I could make any of my dreams come true when it comes to the death penalty system in our country, it would be to work myself out of a job. It would be to work myself out of a job when folks work in different social welfare issues. That's the goal. When I was younger, I would wonder, like, why do we still have homelessness? Haven't people been working on this for years? So that's my hope, to work myself out of a job. But since I know that we can't do that, a very micro answer that I have, and I've kind of managed to organize my thoughts here, would be for more Southern states to follow the footsteps of Virginia, who just 4 years ago, on yesterday, February the 5th, 2021, voted to abolish the Commonwealth's death penalty system. The South should be leading the efforts towards racial reconciliation, towards equity, towards systemic repair, right? You were talking about the isms that are very heavily weighed in the South. According to the Equal Justice Initiative, between 1877 and 1950, there were 599 reported lynchings in Georgia. The only other state that beat Georgia out was Mississippi with 656. Sorry if folks are on the call from Mississippi. Those are the stats. We have work to do. We have work to do. There are correlations between lynching and state-sanctioned death in the South still. That's where my work will be focused, and FLOCC's work will be focused in the South, and really engaging Black pastors, Black communities, and others within the work to address the question and do some narrative change around folks, how they think about the death penalty in the South. And my hope, Jayna, is for more Southern states to pop up and abolish the death penalty. That is my hope. I don't know if we'll be able to do that within the next 5 years, but that is my hope. But what I do know, and the hope that I do have, is the work that Catholics have been doing in the space of anti-death penalty work.
Whatever.
I talked about Black pastors and the things that they have going on, but what compels Catholics to join in this fight?
Well, there's a long history of what the church, and it's developed over time, what the church teaches on the death penalty and its admissibility. And actually, for a long time, there were some loopholes, which basically encompassed nothing that was happening in the United States. We never fit into any of those loopholes. But the problem was that our teaching was kind of a gray area. There were these little, anybody kind of like looked at this, because it was basically, well, if you can't keep people safe away from this individual, if there's not a way to safely incarcerate them, then you are right to execute them. That is not something we experience in the United States, but that's not how a lot of people took it. So it was kind of a gray area. Luckily, in 2018, Pope Francis further developed that teaching and revised the catechism to say that the death penalty is inadmissible because it violates human dignity. So it's not like a legalistic thing. It's not a technicality. It violates human dignity. So it is inadmissible in every case. So now we have a very black and white teaching to kind of focus our energy on, at the same time, having a whole other body of social teachings of the church that tell us that we have a preferential option for the poor and vulnerable. We have to engage in solidarity. We have to recognize the human life and dignity of everyone, regardless of guilt and innocence, regardless of stage of life, regardless of every other kinds of whatever people may think makes someone, able to just be thrown away, right? So we are compelled by this social teaching that is completely undergirded by the gospel, to work on this, the abolition of the death penalty. And this year, especially because this year is a Jubilee year. If any of you know your Leviticus, you'll know what that means. So we are in this year of hope, is what it's been called. We are specifically called to, and Pope Francis has specifically called all Catholics and Catholic pastors in particular to work for the abolition of the death penalty. So that is an actual call to action from the Pope to the worldwide church for this year 2025. So if you want to talk about a compelling reason as a Catholic to work for this, I think that's a pretty compelling reason to do it. And so that's sort of what's undergirding a lot of what we do in the church, is to recognize human dignity, to know that the people that are often targeted by the death penalty are the poor and the vulnerable. So that's our preferential option. And we are also called to be in solidarity with those people, and by so doing, working to reform the systems that marginalize and oppress them. And in this Jubilee year, which is meant to be a year of liberation, I think we could certainly talk about liberation from systems of death, in the way that the capital punishment system works. So that is kind of what's infusing a lot of what we have done and what we're continuing to do, as a church in this Jubilee year. So that's what we're doing. And to get more specific into some things that what we as people of faith can do, you work a lot on the national level in a lot of different states. So what are some things that people of faith could do to join in this movement, to end the death penalty?
There are many roles in the movement, and I know you talked about the highest order that was received from the Pope to compel Catholics. But what usually compels Black pastors and the Black community is this history of racial terror violence and how we have been mistreated within systems. Someone put a question down, and I know we're going to get to questions later, but there have been over 200 exonerations from death row since death row was reinstated in 1976. This was 200 times that we may have gotten it wrong. 200 times where there has been evidence to show that this person may not have committed this crime, through DNA, through evidence, through witness testimony. You can posthumously exonerate someone, but who wants to do that, right? Who wants to be like the state of South Carolina, who posthumously exonerated or made amends for killing George Stinney, who was a 14-year-old in South Carolina who was killed by the death penalty, the youngest one in our entire country. This is serious, because with wrongful convictions, if folks have life imprisonment or even excessive sentencing, you can make that right some kind of way. The healing can begin. If someone is executed, you guys, there's nothing we can really do for them or for their families. So when it comes to people of faith, I have pastors and individuals who are engaged with FLOCC who have 40 members and some who have 4,000 members. There is work to do on every level. You have some people who volunteer to be spiritual advisors for those who are on the row. Some who just write op-eds when we have different cases that have been made public. Some actually come with us to DC to lobby. I actually just came back from the White House in April to support the commutations of the individuals who were on the federal death row, along with so many other organizations. So, and sometimes we just need you to do letter writing, or for you to open up your space if I am in Texas or Florida or North Carolina. So there are so many ways, and you've run into this as well in Georgia, where people can join in this fight with us, because we are truly on the right side of history.
Right. And the same way here in Georgia, we have very specific kind of legislative priorities that we're seeking. And we'll
Yes.
get more into those with the call to action, but I'll explain a little bit about the details of what it looks like, because it can be a confusing issue. So
Right.
people with intellectual disabilities, constitutionally, they cannot be executed. This comes from a Supreme Court case in 2002. So this is a while ago, right? And in 1988, Georgia actually passed a law that was meant to prevent the execution of people with intellectual disabilities. We were the first state to do it. The problem is that the way the bill was drafted has made it nearly impossible to prove intellectual disability in a capital case because the standard of proof was set at beyond a reasonable doubt. No other state uses that standard of proof. It is the highest standard of proof in law, right? Atkins v. Virginia. Yes, that's it. Yeah, so that is the highest standard of proof. The other problem is that this is not determined at a pretrial hearing. It's not determined by the judge. This is determined by the jury at the same time that they determine guilt and innocence. So you can probably see how that one decision impacts the other, right? And it's not that someone who is determined to have an intellectual disability is not guilty. It is guilty but intellectually disabled, and they end up with a life without parole sentence. So all it does is keep them from having a capital sentence, right? So that's how the law works now. What we are trying to do is twofold. One, lower the standard of proof to preponderance of the evidence. And two, have a pre-trial hearing in which this this intellectual disability is determined. It's kind of a win-win for the state. And this is what I say to legislators, because I think anybody who's working in this kind of death penalty abolition space knows that one of the arguments is that capital cases are incredibly expensive. They are very expensive. So why would you have a capital case if the person facing it cannot constitutionally be executed? So that is why we're trying to move that to a pretrial hearing to reshift how all of that works. And so that bill has been introduced and actually had a hearing today. Just this afternoon, just this afternoon, had the first hearing. It has strong bipartisan support, including the Speaker of the House in Georgia. So we are pretty confident that this is going to get out to a House floor vote this year. And we'll talk more in that call to action piece about how you can get involved in that if you're here in Georgia.
Absolutely. I've enjoyed this conversation.
I know.
Jayna,
I'm
eager to hear the questions. I know I had some slides. I don't know if we got an opportunity to kind of share some of those slides really quickly, but before we go into the questions, I would love for folks to just play those slides. So I just wanted to share a little bit, a picture collage with you all. This was Purvis Payne. This was the first case that inspired me to found FLOCC in Memphis, Tennessee. Purvis Payne was a 19-year-old Black man. He was the son of a Church of God in Christ pastor in Memphis who was accused of killing an individual and her child. Now, Purvis Payne does live with intellectual disabilities. So what Jayna just got through talking about as far as in the state of Georgia, some of that was still happening in Tennessee, but in Tennessee, if you can go to the next slide, Tennessee, and this is his father and his two sisters. His sister, the youngest, the baby, Rolanda, she still advocates today for Purvis Payne. Purvis Payne has been removed from death row because in Tennessee, we were using an old definition according to the DSM model of folks with intellectual disabilities. So Purvis Payne met that threshold by today's standards with the DSM, but he did not meet it back in the 1990s. So we were able to change the law in Tennessee to reflect the new definition of intellectual disabilities and therefore get him off of death row. And he will be eligible for parole in 2027. You can move to the next slide. And so this is the FLOCC group. This was the first convening that we had in Atlanta, Georgia, where pastors from all of the country came solely because they wanted to speak with each other on how they can eliminate the death penalty on a federal level, but also in their states. So Southern states are represented, but also states that are not executing, because there are pastors in non-executing states that also want to know what they can do to help Southern states. You can go to the next slide. This is a group in Augusta, Georgia, that I spoke to last year at the beginning of the year around this time. Pastors in Augusta are fired up to learn more about what's going on in the state of Georgia in relation to the death penalty. So we have that working group down there. And the next slide. And this is a group that is in Nevada. So this group right now is supercharged and working with our advocates that are also in Nevada. And I believe the last slide shows the group that went to DC to talk to President Biden's counsel and also Vice President Harris' counsel about the federal death row, and to speak with the pardons attorney so that she could be a champion for us. So thank you guys so much for showing those slides of FLOCC, and I'm excited to hear any questions that folks may have that we didn't answer.
So one, and I think both of us can speak to this, this is a multi-faith and multiracial group. So how do you see that dovetailing with your work? And I can speak a little bit to that from the Catholic Church perspective. We work with everyone. We work with the Jewish community. We work with other Christian denominations. We work with the Muslim community, with the Hindu community, with whatever other community that is on this kind of voyage of secular organizations, right, that are connected to the abolition movement. We work with everyone because we have a shared purpose to ending the death penalty. And so we're very much committed to having this be a truly multi-faith effort, because it's the only way that it's going to happen. It's only through uniting all of these different threads that we're going to make any kind of headway in this abolition space.
And I love that question. FLOCC is nonpartisan, so you can lean right, you can lean left, you can be apolitical, and you can rest in the middle to be a part. You just have to agree that there are some issues with state-sanctioned death. We are also multi-faith, but with FLOCC, you must identify as a person who is Black, African-American, or Indigenous, because we believe that there are some unique challenges when it comes with the death penalty and how it mirrors racial terror violence of lynching. I stand on the shoulders of Ida B. Wells. And Ida B. Wells, she was a champion against lynching in the South. In fact, Memphis, Tennessee. She started in Memphis, Tennessee. So I stand on her shoulders. I stand on the shoulders of Mary Church Terrell, Nannie Helen Barrows, like those individuals who began the fight already. So they worked with everyone as well. They work with multi-faith leaders within the South, because that's what we need. Now more than ever, we need faith, y'all. We need everyone of every faith. I want to shout out to Pastor Daryl Gray, who is also on my board. He came with me to DC and actually introduced me to this wonderful group. But there was a question also, Deirdre, since we're on the shout out. There's a question about narrative change, and Jayna, you can speak to this as well. But I'm actually applying for a grant opportunity to talk about narrative change around the death penalty and how people think about the death penalty. The death penalty is not reserved for the worst of the worst. There are so many challenges when it comes to fiscal responsibility. I can see Kathy Harmon nodding her head. In a sense, it does not deter crime. There are just so many issues. Bleach juries, what folks in Louisiana call Jim Crow juries. There are just so many issues that I believe if folks really dug deep, they would automatically think differently about the death penalty. But since this is a multi-faith group, I have to just cast my net out there to say we need evangelicals We need Southern Baptists to invite folks into their faith spaces to talk about the death penalty from a different angle and not just talk about it from crime and punishment. So definitely narrative change work is what I will be doing in the next couple of years.
Deirdre, you know I'm not gonna be able to stay quiet. Just can't keep it to myself. When I think about it, especially as in this moment that we're in, and Jayna, I'm gonna ask you to also lean into this as well. But like in the moment that we're in, where there seems to be this like, you know, this that you own morality and this idea that you're pro-life and you own morality, but that this issue around the death penalty, like how do we challenge that in this particular moment? Is like, if you're going to be pro-life, you need to be pro-life, all pro-life in every aspect of life and life more abundantly. And so as you all think about how this is, you know, the political moment that we're in, are there some guidance that you all have for us around how to speak to this issue, you know, not quite from the center, but like, how do we speak with some cognitive dissonance? That's what I loved about Dr. King. Everybody loves I Have a Dream, but that's not what he said. He said, America has written us a bad check. It came back insufficient funds, but I have a dream. You can be redeemed and see this beautiful world that I want to see. And I feel like what we're missing right now, especially as it relates to death penalty, like we talk statistics and we talk, you know, a little bit humanity, but it's like, how do we have that, how do we create some dissonance, but then invite people back to, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
invite folks back in.
Yeah, I mean, we particularly have talking points for conservatives, right? And I think that's kind of, it may be something that you're teetering on, but we do have some pro-life for the whole life talking points that I would love to share with folks. When you talk to conservatives and folks that are pro-death penalty, some of the issues that I've seen when it comes to conversion, Deirdre is pro-life, but also fiscal responsibility. In Louisiana, they have not executed individuals within 15 years, but they still dedicate $7.7 million to sustain their death row, money that could go towards youth jobs, education, potholes. We all can raise our hand for that. So definitely fiscal responsibility and fiscal allocation. But also innocence is something that compels folks that are pro-life, because this whole issue of limited government and did the government get it right? Can we trust our government? No, when it comes to the death penalty, because there have been so many issues at the intersection of so many things when it comes to state-sanctioned death, intellectual disability, racial discrimination, youth. So it's just a lot, poverty and the death penalty, adverse childhood experiences and the death penalty. So there are a lot of things that we talk about when we talk to conservatives. Jayna, do you have some thoughts?
Yeah, actually, it's funny you bring up that word innocence, and I think this goes to that narrative change. When people are pro-life, a lot of times it's pro-innocent life. And they talk about, you know, oh, innocent children and innocent this and innocent that. But as soon as someone commits a crime, somehow they're now, you know, able to be thrown away in a way that never happened in the gospel. And so I think if you're talking to conservatives from a religious perspective and that moral perspective, I think leaning on those kinds of stories are helpful to remind them that this is not something that our faith does. It never does. No one is ever thrown away. And so I think trying to promote human dignity in a holistic way. In the church, we like to use the phrase womb to tomb to talk about this consistent ethic of life that we have. I think that is something that gives us some credibility with people who are more on one side than the other, because they see that, well, we embrace both sides of where this, of the life question and all of the things in between, all of those other things that make up life questions. Yeah, Bruce, you got a question or something to add?
Yeah, I was just going to add briefly. I'm Bruce Turnball. For those who don't know, I'm on the board of the Multifaith EMI, also on the board of the Jewish Council for Public Affairs, and advocate a great deal on these issues. I, it's very hard to get my mind around this, given what's gone on in the last 10 days, 2 weeks. But in the first Trump administration, there was a very significant bill that passed called the First Step Act, which didn't associate with the death penalty, but it was a significant change in the sentencing policies related to a variety of crimes. And it came to be in large part because the faith community in Iowa met with the senator from Iowa, whose name has gone right out of my head, but he's now almost 90 years old, and was then the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and he said, "Okay, you've convinced me. We need to do this." And Senator Grassley, he pushed that forward. And one would not have thought that Senator Grassley was going to be a champion of sentencing reform, but he was. And so I think that the points that you all are making about it's a different kind of narrative change in a sense, but about the ways in which different kinds of people can understand this issue from their own faith perspective is really important. And I know in the Jewish tradition, theologically, Judaism is not opposed to the death penalty. However, theologically, there is such a high standard if you are going to impose the death penalty for what the proof must be, that essentially it's impossible to meet that standard as human beings. And so there's a broad consensus in the Jewish community to oppose the death penalty. And so I think we're happy to be part of the coalitions that work on this. But I put back to my main point. It's important for people to not lose faith at this particular moment, but to persevere and to say there are ways of communicating with people, of all kinds of people, and the dignity of humans and the dignity of human life is something that we all agree on at some level. And so I encourage people to keep going.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bruce. Yeah, we definitely need to let ourselves be open and be surprised by the people who may come alongside us. Because, for instance, this bill in the Georgia House, the person who is sponsoring it is a Republican, and most of the co-sponsors are Republicans. So we have issues on which a lot of these things can align regardless of the side of the aisle that you're on, or how far on that aisle, away from the center aisle that you are.
Right.
You may find that people that you wouldn't think would listen to you may end up doing it, especially if you can get a big enough group or a persuasive enough group together and go meet with that legislator, go to their district office, go to DC and meet with them in their office. However you can meet with them, they really put a premium on people who take the time to reach out and speak with them, and they work for us. So if they want to keep those jobs, they need to listen to us.
I think that's the key word, Jayna. Listen. Let's go on some listening tours. I position myself moderately, but I am always just super encouraged to listen to the other side, to grab some of their talking points, because at the end of the day, we are advocating for real people. So regardless of what we feel on a specific certain issue that may not align with the other side, we have to be willing to listen on some issues that may have some room for collaboration and bipartisan buy-in. Aleah?
Hi, thank you. I was just going to say, at a time like this, just to double down on this, where there are a plethora of issues that are outraging us and causing us to pull our hair out on a daily basis with new revelations, this is one of the very few that we may be able to see some sort of common common purpose, right, in terms of the death penalty. I think that as a funder previously who was supporting organizations that were working against the death penalty, one of the most effective arguments that we found, this is back, now we're talking like 20 years ago, when I was having people who survived being on death row and were exonerated be part of the conversation with people who were in support of the death penalty, to say, had this been in place, I would be dead. And also having sometimes their family members speak about how excruciatingly difficult it is to have someone that you know and love who's not guilty of the crime that they have been convicted of, about living in a place that is telling them they're going to die constantly. And there's something about that nobody can refute. Anybody can understand that it is wrong to execute people who are not guilty of the crimes that they've been convicted of. Like, that's, at least in most of our understanding, that's just wrong. So making sure that we can really expand on the significance of how frequently that happens, like 200 people since the 70s, and that's just so far. We still have that ongoing, and in states in which they have passed legislation about wrongful convictions, in which where they're actually looking into old cases and revisiting those kinds of cases, more and more are coming forward. In New York, we had like one detective who was responsible for at least 14 wrongful convictions so far. And so I that's why I'm just saying that it's really important for us to bring the people whose lives were impacted by this and who can say, I would have been dead. And I'm telling you, there are definitely going to be people of faith that have been engaged in those people's campaigns for retrials or for their exoneration, and that might be another way to really press this home.
Oh, Aleah, we're already doing that work. So there's an excellent group, Witness to Innocence. Its executive director is Herman Lindsay, and Kathy just put in the chat that he's moving to Georgia. I did not know that. But Witness to Innocence is the organization that compiles the stories of exonerees and also deploys them out to speak to faith groups, schools, and other organizations to talk about their stories. So Witness to Innocence is one of those groups. And also I put in Journey of Hope, who supports victims' family members and those have been impacted, because a lot of times the other side likes to use, that's solace, that's justice. But you have victims' families that are saying, no, it's not. It takes us through years of the appellate process. So we're doing that work. Thank you.
Actually, that's the group that I funded early on, Witness to Innocence, in their early years. Yeah.
Love it. Love it.
Small world. Yeah, they do public speaking training for death row exonerees and their families, or at least they did anyway. It's really, and that's something that any of our partners or congregations or even individuals could do, help support that kind of.
Thank you.
Exactly. Oh, we've got a raised hand. Do you want to highlight them, Katie, so we can get a question?
Oh, I am in the right one.
Hey,
everybody. So I'm going to come at this a different direction a little bit, because there is the changing the narrative that needs to be done, and bringing about compassion and empathy that is so lacking in our political realm. But I also want to come at this from the power base, which is, the multi-faith community is a huge power base. When these politicians see the pastors, the teachers coming forth and saying, this is a member of my congregation and I am supporting them and I need you to support them because honestly, my congregation is full of your donors that help you to stay in office. And of course, we would not want to put it as bluntly as I just did. However, I'm just calling a spade a spade. Running my campaign with 85 to Stay Alive, I can't tell you how many times I've been asked to come up with the financial figures as to why these legislators should, pay money to put air conditioning in our prisons. They want to know how is this, going to demonstrate some level of fiscal responsibility, right? So also just being ready for that argument. And I think there's multiple ways of approaching that. There's, of course, what I said earlier, which was the nice threat of our donors probably aren't going to donate to your campaign, right? And then we are carrying, as the nonprofit, as the places where people come to worship, we are expected to pick up the pieces and deal with the burdens of the people that you have essentially ran a Mack truck over. So we're going to need you to change so you can help lift part of our burden. That's just my 2 cents.
No, that's a good 2 cents.
That might be maybe 20 cents at least. Deirdre, go ahead.
Yeah, so I want to make sure that we have the opportunity for folks to break down into small groups so we can digest together as a community what we've heard. There's a couple of questions that we're going to throw in the chat for you all to, kind of grapple with. One is this idea of storytelling. So I love Audre Lorde. She says that the tools of the master's house the tools of the masters won't dismantle the master's house. It won't dismantle oppressive systems. It can get you somewhere, but it's not going to get you all the way there. And so one of the tools that we have is storytelling and connection. So the very first question we want you to ask, and answer in community is, how are you impacted directly or indirectly by this issue of death penalty? Why are you on this call today? That's the first question. The second question is, because we are coming to this through our faith tradition, and every time we have one of these calls, we put out a toolkit, and it's not an exhaustive toolkit, but it is a work in progress. And so what we want you all to talk about is like, what of your holy texts animate to you to know that this issue is not morally sound to you. And we want to take some notes on, if there's somebody that would take some notes, because we want to add those scriptures to our tools that we can use. And then finally, how can we call for collaboration around this issue? So at the end, we're going to have call to actions, and we're also going to have calls for collaboration for everyone to hear. But if you're doing something in your local community that's adjacent to this issue of abolishing the death penalty, talk to your folks about it, because that's the Underground Railroad to me. It's like, when you learn something new, you go, oh, maybe we can try that. But without it, you're just kind of, sometimes you're making up stuff, sometimes you're not, you know what I mean? Like some best practices. And so the 3 questions: 1, why are you here tonight? 2, what are your concerns? Why are you impacted by this issue directly or indirectly? 2, how does it land with your faith tradition? And are there scriptures or ideas within your faith community that need to be highlighted, in particular around this issue? And then finally, tell us what you're doing. Like share. We're going to break down into small groups. Are we ready? You'll have about 20 minutes in your small group. We have some, what do you call it? We have some words. So step up, step back, like don't hog the mic. Let everybody get an opportunity to be a part of the conversation, because we really do want this to be a conversation. So we're breaking down. Thank you all so much. Jayna and Joia, thank you. You are welcome to join a small group if you'd like, but if you need to jump, or we understand, and we thank you for your time. Let's just open it up for a couple minutes for some reflections in the small group. So what did you hear that brought you joy? What are still kind of concerning, or what, like, a aha moment for you in the small group? How are y'all feeling about the small groups?
I felt it was good. I was able to speak. My name is Frankie Mills, by the way.
Yes.
I joined this call because I'm a part of FLOCC. I'm a board member at FLOCC, and but in general, I had the same question at our board retreat. Why are you involved in this type of work? Well, because there are people out there who don't have a voice. And I find that, being part of organizations like this, I'm able to have a voice, but also I'm able to connect with people who are like-minded and also are trying to mitigate the system the best way we can. So I think unity is a big deal. And just being able to come together and hash out, like I was telling Jayna and Annette, did I say your name correctly? I'm sorry.
Amit.
Amite, excuse me. Amite, uh, just being able to hash out my feelings because sometimes I feel like I don't have a safe space to do so. So that's my purpose and why I'm speaking today.
Thank you. I'm going to pick on T. Ellis. We hadn't heard from her. Or maybe not. T, can you come off mute or no? Maybe not. Anyone else? Just some reflections. How was your time together in community?
Yes, Bruce, Kathy Harmon Christian and I had a good conversation, and I have to say that I was heartened to hear of the progress. And, we'll knock on wood and hope for the best going forward, but the progress in Georgia on a bipartisan basis on at least some change. So that gave me some hope.
Good.
I was with, I learned from Kathy McGregor about the Prison Story Project, which I am in the Pittsburgh area, Pennsylvanians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty. And I think that this project and the film that they have made is something that we can use to try to reach a lot more people. We're doing a lot of work now, or not a lot. We're using Zoom several times a year to interview various people who have written books on the death penalty, and we're a very small group, and we're not a faith-based group. We're although we did have a subset called Faith in Action for years, but then most of the people that were part of that were old. And now our little group is old. So we're trying to recruit and get to more young people. So I'm hoping that I'll be in touch with Kathy to see whether or not that's something that we can use to try to grab hearts and minds.
Yeah, Asha, thank you. And Kathy, it would be great if, I don't know if you have the information, because we're always looking for good tools to share. And so if there's a tool.
I'm the project director of the Prison Story Project. And I've moved from Arkansas back home to Memphis last year, but when we were in Arkansas, we were given unprecedented access to men on Arkansas's death row back in 2016. 10 of the 34 men on the row participated in our storytelling creative writing project. Our theater director curated it into a staged reading, and we've received lots of grant funding. We were able to tour 6 actors who carried the men's work and a musician just all across the country. And then when we were in Wichita, Kansas, we were able to have video filmmakers record that. So we have a film version. And I'm ordained in the Episcopal Church, and we've been working to abolish the death penalty since the 50s and have called on congregations and parishioners to do that. This film exemplifies the men's humanity. You cannot escape the humanity of the men on the row who tell their stories. So we do have the film. I just received a grant from the Episcopal Diocese here in West Tennessee to tour the film to Episcopal churches across West Tennessee, and I'm partnering with the Tennessee Coalition to abolish the death penalty on that. And so if there's anyone is interested in having a showing of the film, you can reach me at prisonstoryproject@gmail.com, and we do have a website at prisonstoryproject.com.
Thank you so much. I'm going to pass it back over to Jayna for all of us. I say us because I have a 404 number, but for all of us that are in Georgia or surrounding areas, there's we really worked with Reverend Crawford to figure out when to put this this installation and this conversation, and we wanted to make sure we had usually, if you all recall, our calls are usually like the fourth Thursday of the month, but we raised this call, put this call on a Tuesday so that we could have a little bit of time if you were able to come and join this action. So Jane, if you could tell us a little bit about the action, and then we'll have calls for collaboration, and we will end today.
Great. So this is for people in Georgia. We will be having an advocacy day at the Capitol next week on Wednesday. I think Katie already put the registration link in there, and I dropped our graphics to let you know who all of our partners are, because there are a lot of people involved in planning this. We will be at the Capitol on Wednesday, February 12th, meeting at Trinity United Methodist at 8 a.m. sharp. Before making our way across the street to the Senate, where Bishop Robin Deese is going to be the chaplain for the day in the Senate. And then we'll be going to the ropes to advocate with our legislators on House Bill 123. That's very easy to remember. House Bill 123 to end the death penalty for people with intellectual disabilities in Georgia. And then we'll have a press conference on the South Steps, and then we're still working out the next bit of it, and I'm sure we'll be able to tell you on the morning that we gather. But if you're in Georgia, if you can join us in person, please do. If you can't, we will be developing a call script for you so that you can call your legislator or email your legislator, either way, but do one or the other so that you can advocate for this bill, so that we are able to reach every legislator in the Georgia Assembly on the same day. We are going to get them talking about this bill. And we're going to do it by all working together to reach out to our legislators. So February 12th, House Bill 123. So sign up and register, even if you're not going to be in person, because that's how we'll know how to send you the call script.
Thank you so much. We'll also add this information to our email that gives the toolkit. We'll add this action step to our base and get that out this week as well. So thank you all so much. I want to have calls for collaboration. The whole purpose of us being together, one as a coalition, is so that we can act together, but also as we're looking at what's happening across the country, that we can be supportive of things that our sojourners are doing. So do we have any folks on the call who have any actions that are coming up?
I'll definitely go. So our campaign is the 85 to Stay Alive campaign, and it's about getting air conditioning in the prisons across the United States. It used to be just Texas that we were focused on, but we've expanded across the United States because so many other states are having the same difficulties, and with climate change, it's really on the rise. So we are having a multi-faith webinar this Thursday at noon, and I put the flyer and I put the registration link in the chat. For whoever would like to join us, we'll be hearing from impacted individuals as well as faith-based leaders, as well as I think Representative Sherman's former Representative Sherman from Texas is going to be joining us for that. So I'd love to see you guys there for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other calls for collaboration? So I have somewhat of a call for collaboration. So we've been working alongside another faith-based coalition, Multifaith EMI has been, and a part of what they're doing is asking folks to meet in Selma at the Selma Bridge crossing. So for many of you all, like when I think about the Selma Bridge crossing, it is just Sunday. It is that iconic picture of what happens on Sunday where everybody just crosses the bridge. You get your good Instagram picture, right? That kind of thing. But actually, it is a time for community organizers to come together and talk about the campaigns across the country. And so Saturday, there's like a half day designated that's being led by All of Us or None and the formerly incarcerated people's movement to talk about the campaigns that are happening across the country. And so I don't know if anybody was planning on going to Selma for the 60th anniversary. I implore you to go in a day early and then participate in and they're having a formerly incarcerated people's march on Saturday at noon to cross the bridge as formerly incarcerated people and to talk about, the issues that impact formerly incarcerated people. And then from 2 to 6, they'll have organizers talking about campaigns across the country to include prison labor, and some other issues. I will send that alongside the information when we send it out. But I don't know if folks are going out. I would encourage you to be a part. So I think that's what we have. How does everyone feel?
Very good.
Very good. Very good. Very good. So I am. It's right at 8 o'clock. We want to thank you all for attending. Again, we'll send out an email that has all of our next steps in it. It'll also have the tool. We encourage you that if you have been building a team at home or in your congregation or in your faith institution, share the information. You all are on these calls, to help to support. We did these calls to help to support your grounding, but the goal was for you to go back and share the information with your family or friends or inside your congregation. And so however you can help to amplify this issue, to continue conversations in your local areas around this issue, we would appreciate it. And it helps us to build solidarity. So that being said, we didn't have anyone to do a closing prayer, but Sister Aleah, is she still on?
I am. Oh, okay.
Yeah, if you
Certainly.
would like, I don't want to put you on the spot. You
No,
can.
that's fine.
Okay.
It's okay.
Okay.
If we could just take a moment. Creator, we thank you so much for an opportunity to fellowship with people who carry their faith with them and act on it on a daily basis, whose faith motivates them to act on behalf of others, whose faith motivates them to bring peace and justice to this world you created for us. We thank you so much for your love and your kindness. And we ask that you might multiply that in our hearts as we continue this work. Strengthen us for the days ahead. Strengthen us for the challenges ahead. But remind us to love one another throughout it. Amen.